Greetings, I am Erin Patton, Metaphysical Master in a Millennial Age, and it is my life's purpose to guide you and organizations along an enlightened path. So I invite you to sit comfortably and tune in as I welcome you to the Meta Business Millennial, where we get the real conversations you won't get in the boardroom so that we understand this is exactly the path we need to be on in order to grow, evolve, and thrive. Here we are together on a Wednesday live, and I won't do that all over again, but thank you guys for calling it out, and I'll keep my eye out on the mute button to make sure I don't get muted again. Hey guys, thank you guys for coming in and being here in the live, and we are crystal clear. Okay. And today's live is really special because I have two guests joining me. I put it on my story yesterday that we are no longer shrinking for other people. Okay. And it's just really that simple. And I feel like so many of us, like people in the chat right here, and just in general, are sick of not being able to be themselves. And I feel like we're just in a day and time where it's exhausting. It's almost like killing ourselves to not be in our truth, to not be in our authenticity. And I did a wonderful podcast a few weeks ago with Alicia, a guest Alicia, who I'm not sure if you guys remember that, or you can go back and check it out. And she was so generous in introducing me to her network and opening me up to her network. And so, actually, the guest that I have on today came from that conversation around being more authentic, around diversity, around all the things that are happening in our society in this day and time, particularly with this new presidential administration and the shakeup that's happening across corporations as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it means to be diverse, what it means to be equal, what it means to be included. And I'm really looking forward to talking more about these things with my guests today. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my guests to the stage. So, Kayla, welcome, and also Veltria, welcome. Here, can you
Thank you.
see? There you are.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, nice. And it looks like someone just said in the comments that they just recorded a video on authenticity today. So it looks like we are aligned with what people are feeling and experiencing. So I again am so happy to have you guys here. I want to actually start with Veltria if she can just do a brief intro of herself and jumping right into your narrative around this topic around shrinking ourselves and no longer shrinking ourselves and living in our truth and even psychological safety. I sort of teased that a little bit too in the marketing. So I would just love to have you start in sharing with all of us more about you.
Thank you. So my name is Veltria Roman, and in our conversation, the way that this all happened, in speaking with Kayla and Aaron, we were really looking at how I got into my new career. I have recently changed careers and started working in human resources full time after spending 25 years working in arts administration. Um, and really, what happened is that I got burnt out. I was hurting. I completely lost myself for quite a while. And about a year ago, I decided to get better. So I did all the things that you're supposed to do. So I started going to therapy. I was going back to church. I started working out again. Um, Paying attention to my health, changing my lifestyle as far as food and things like that, trying to get better. And as I continued to work on me, what I found was that I was drowning and I was burnt out because I wasn't able to bring my whole self to the work I was doing. And I had been stifled for many reasons. Growing up, working in a PWI, where you know the arts is such a wonderful place and such a stifling place at the same time. And I started looking back at things that I had been experiencing over the years and things that I had come in contact with. And I started thinking about the We See You What document. I was telling you guys about this before when we talked. During the pandemic, a number of high profile actors in the theater world came together and put together this document called We See You White American Theater. And it was a list of demands. It was, these are the things we need to take care of us in this industry. And I was shocked by it. I couldn't believe that they were saying these things, not because I didn't think they were true, but because I didn't think we were allowed to say it. I worked in this industry for, like I said, for 20 years at the time, and I had never said those things out loud. And so as I was looking back on those things last year, as I was trying to heal, I realized that I had been shrinking and trying to make myself invisible because I was in this industry that didn't want to take care of me in the way that I needed. And I was at an organization that cared about my labor and needed my labor, but didn't care about me.
Hmm.
And that's not individual people, but that was overall what happened. And I knew Kayla, and I called her, and I was like, I need a lunch. I need to run this by someone else. And I had a breakdown. I had a complete breakdown with Kayla, and she's like, "Well, you're really good at this work, and I have a mentorship program. Let's see if this is something you want to do." And it was the first time in a long time that someone in a work capacity saw me, and I got to bring 100% of me to the work that Kayla was doing and that I'm now doing and to the table. And my experiences mattered. My desire to mentor and care for people and care for organizations, and really what I realized I could do working in HR that I couldn't do in my previous position was influence organizations to take care of their employees the way I needed someone to take care of me in my
Mhm.
last position.
I love that. And also, I mean, beautiful segue at the end because that brings us right to your role with Kayla and Kayla's role too in this conversation. But before we make that jump, I really want to just commend you for doing the work. Because, first and foremost, when people go through tough times, it's really easy to fall into the victim mind. It's really easy to blame white people. I mean, it's really easy to put down a list of demands and say, this is all your fault. And things aren't working out for me because you suck or you're racist. And, those things very well could be true, but at the end of the day, the change starts with self. And for you to do that work and getting the therapy and eating right, going to church, growing a relationship with God, whatever that looks like, that actually is what makes the shift and what makes, the change happen for you. And the awareness too that, wow, like I deserve better. And, I just want to say that's amazing to you first and foremost.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, I think that what happened for me specifically was that as I was doing the work, that was what gave me the strength to see that it was more than just what was within me that was causing this. And I wouldn't have been able to see it otherwise. Um, because it is really easy to fall into victimhood.
100%. And yeah, and to that point, you kind of understood how to be more what we've talked about. Actually, we talked about this in Alicia's episode, moving from victim to creator. once you move to that creator role and being able to create more of your life, more of the happiness, then you met Kayla and you started working together. Can you share more about that? And maybe Kayla can jump in and share more about her background and her story, and we can start having a group conversation.
So Kayla and I knew each other professionally, and um, I had thought about doing HR and trying to move into that role specifically in my former organization and trying to see how I could make that work. Um, and that relationship, that professional relationship ended, and I came to her honestly because we had built a friendship, because she made me feel safe. And at the time, professionally, there weren't a lot of people that made me feel safe. And being able to talk to her and her say, hey, I have this mentorship program. We can go over the things that I experience every day as an HR consultant and see if it's meant for you. Which was really the perfect opportunity. I don't know anybody else who gets to like dip their toe into a career change. And I got to do that. And then I started working for her part time, doing paperwork and things that didn't require a lot of interaction with clients because I had a job. But what I was finding that I was loving it. I'm, writing um, trainings and answering questions and doing things, and I'm like, this speaks to me. And so Kayla and I started talking more, and she brought me on the team.
Yeah, I think I just add like I you talked a little bit earlier about the psychological safety component, and um, all along Veltria's journey that she's just spoken of, all I really did was just hold a safe space for her to heal, for her to grow, for her to um, see the potential that I already saw in her, but to truly embrace it and feel it and believe it. Because I think sometimes when we've gone through hard times, it's hard to see ourselves the way other people see us. And I just kept reiterating that every time I talked to her, like, you have what it takes to do what I do. Like, let's do this, and that's, I think, where she, refound herself, I guess, rediscovered who she was and what she wanted to be doing. So, yeah.
And can you share, Kayla, a little bit more about your background and your
Sure.
work and how it even is relevant to, kind of this conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So, I own and operate a HR consulting firm. We do fractional HR work for small to medium-sized businesses who don't need, full time HR, but obviously the people of the business are the heart. And I'm very passionate about ensuring businesses and leaders like you, Erin, understand the mindfulness component, because if that mindset isn't there, we can't get to improving the positive workplace. We can't get to all of the tactical things that are happening for HR if the mindset of the leaders is not to create a safe workplace, to create a place where people can thrive and bring all of their talents and all of their experiences to contribute to a bigger, better, more powerful organization that can really impact the world. So that's what we do day in and day out. And the name of the company is Humanity HR, because I started it because of my belief in humanity and that you have good people everywhere. And if we can all come together and share and build off of that perspective, businesses will be a lot better for it. So,
100%. And this is, I believe, why, I really wanted to talk with you. And then you looped Veltria into the conversation specifically because of the nuances of the diversity piece. But I really want to double click for you, Kayla, around why this work is important for businesses. Because I have the meta business world, I've been doing work with organizations, and mindset and mindfulness is absolutely for me, more important than anything else that a business could be investing in this day and time. Because to Veltria's point that she made earlier, business has historically just seen labor as labor. and have ignored the people and absolutely the souls behind the work, which are, in my view, not my just my view, but scientifically, it's like 66% of us is invisible, is metaphysical. So we're physical, part physical, emotional, and spiritual. Yet there's these aspects of ourselves that completely get left out of the picture. This sort of this invisible aspect, this mindset aspect, is now becoming more seen and heard in corporate America, if you will, or at least in leading edge companies. And we see how it completely shifts everything that companies do, everything from, people get community building and having more of a familial structure and nature, and there being much more success long term for organizations when there actually is that focus on mindset. And so I really want to, like I said, double click on it for you, why this is important for businesses today and how you're able to help leaders see this investment in their resources, their human resources, actually pays well into the future.
Yeah. Veltria and I actually just worked on a presentation of not just about what is psychological safety, but why it's important to the bottom line. This is something that's hard for me sometimes to um, get across to owners and people with a really structured business mindset, because for me, I just care about people. That's why I do what I do. But a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people are in business because they want to make money. So how do we convey how important this is, not just for humanity, but for your business from a ROI perspective? And that, I think, is really powerful when speaking to business owners, because they want to see that. They want to know, why does this matter to my business? And my experience and why I really got into this space. We do all the tactical HR things, but this is what I'm passionate about, because we would get into these initiatives with businesses, and three months in, realize they didn't have the mindset needed to make those shifts happen. They would get sucked back into their old habits, their old patterns, their old way of doing things, because they hadn't done the mindset work to really have the inner knowledge and strength to move forward. I've always been fond of the adage, go slow to go fast. And that's where I think a lot of business owners, if they would focus more on themselves, their mindset first, before just trying to jump into all of these initiatives, they have a lot more success.
100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there anything that you do say to clients when they're eager to make that jump, as opposed to, sitting with, the change, or sitting with the healing? I call it healing, but that's really hard for some business people to receive. But sitting with the self development that needs to happen in order to meet the needs of the change.
I do. I'm much better about it now. When I first started working with a lot of organizations, I kind of just let them make the decision. And now that we really build relationships with our clients, we're not just in working on a project and out. We are there. We're their HR. So it allows me to have those deeper conversations to say, you know, this is a great direction you may be heading, but sleep on it. Take a couple of days. Make sure this is really the best decision for the organization. If you meditate, meditate. If you pray, pray. Like, take some time before just jumping in, and look at the holistic view of how this is going to impact your business, not just this is what I want to do right now, so let's go. I've learned a lot from Alicia about how to do that myself, and so I have seen the positive impacts it's made on my business. So I really try to impart that same wisdom on my clients when I see them just kind of eager to get going, but maybe not as confident as they should be in that decision. So,
Oh. And
yeah.
I
I
want
want to. Can I add something to that? So I just
yes.
want to speak to working with Kayla now, and seeing how she does that also on the other side for the clients who aren't so eager to make the change, and being able to break it down. Like, here's the deal. You don't have to do this, but here's where you're vulnerable. One of the first projects that I worked on for HHR, where I directly interacted with clients was a anti-harassment training, but it was in person. But I was presenting to lawyers. They don't care about the touchy-feely stuff. So when I was working on it, Kayla was like, make sure you put in there the cost of litigation. That's the part that's going to speak to them. And it was very clear in the very first training that is what spoke to them. And so one of the things that I have learned while working with Kayla and the way that she approaches her clients is to look at what matters to them to get them to the place, it might be slow, but to get them to the place where they are caring about more than the bottom line and start seeing the people. Because if you start with the money and then it's like the way you avoid spending the money is by treating people well and seeing people and letting them come into this space whole, it's a lot easier to get there.
I love that because, at the end of the day, this work is people work. And if we're not focused on how we can support people in getting to and through their goals, then, like, what's the point, right? And, with that, I really want to dig a little bit deeper, Beltry, into your story, around like how some of this relates specifically to you, because I feel like sometimes the personal stories, the personal experiences can be really empowering for people, and I would love to hear from you on that.
Well, working in the arts, you don't get into the arts, the nonprofit arts sector, unless you have a passion for it. Which I did. I was an actor until my 20s and then realized that I wanted a steady paycheck, but I could stay around the arts and the theater um, by working in administration. And so what I what I know now, because I am going through healing, because I'm still in therapy and I talk about this stuff every week, is that it is very easy for an organization to take advantage of you when you're doing passion work. Um, because you fall back to that. You fall back to the reason you're there.
Yeah.
And it's not about the money and it's not about the this and it's not about the that until you realize that you're working 60 hours a week and your child spends weekends sleeping on the floor in your office because that's where you spend your weekends is in the office. Um, and as I was healing and as I started to take care of myself more, I started to see the ways in which I had not felt safe. How and I don't know a better way to say this. I'm just gonna say it the best way I can. I'm not a wallflower. I'm not a quiet person. So when I say that I was shrinking myself, I was never quiet. I was offering my opinions, I was doing my job, I was speaking up, I was sometimes even, doing presentations and on stage and things like that. But what I wasn't was bringing my whole self to the situation because I knew that that wasn't safe for me. When I had an opinion about the way that people communicated via email. As I was healing, I brought up the fact that we are doing theater. I love it. I absolutely love it. But everything's not an emergency that needs to be answered at 11 p.m. via text. So I'm going to stop. I'm putting my phone on do not disturb after 9 p.m.
Right.
That was met with pushback. And I was like, it wasn't safe for me to take care of myself in that way and to say that that's what I needed. Um, there were situations about email communication and how we communicated, and things that felt at the beginning like small and I should just get over it, I would bring them up and get shot down,
Hmm.
or worse, get iced out. And just not get a response to it, which made me feel bad for feeling or reacting the way I did. And I'm very careful with the way that I react and the words that I use. I'm the type of person that if you upset me, I'm going to walk away from the situation. I'm going to wait a day. I'm going to decide if I still feel this way tomorrow before I send the email that I started writing that says what I actually think. And, and then I'm going to deal with it professionally. And more, I found myself never saying anything because that was safer for me.
Yes.
Um, Also, in nonprofit arts, and this is at every organization I've ever worked at. So this is not specific to my last one. Everybody wears multiple hats. They're small. It's a nonprofit. You're trying to save money, and you care about this. So of course you're going to jump in because you love it. Well, eventually you get to the place where it's too much, but you're not allowed to say that anymore.
Mm.
And as I was trying to figure out why I was so sad, why I lost my light. I completely lost my light. Um, I just realized that if I couldn't speak up and change these things because I wasn't in a safe space to do so, then what am I doing?
Right.
And I mean, I even sometimes got met with, "You're right, that has happened," or "You're right, that's not right." But and that's the second part, I think, to the psychological safety that Kayla talks about. I actually saw Kayla's Kayla did Alicia's podcast before, and I watched that, and that's when it really clicked for me, and that was before I was working for HHR full time, and because it's not just like feeling safe to bring yourself into the workspace and give yourself completely, it's also the safety to say, "I'm not okay, and how can we solve this together if you want me to be here?" Um, and that was the part that I realized was missing for me.
Mm. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share like the full story of the journey because I know, first of all, I had the the very similar experience. I know so many, countless other women have had similar experiences where we are in industries or we're in positions that we dreamt of being in. Of course, we're willing to take the lowest salary, the extra pay cut, and we want to do it because we actually care. And when people around us see that, oftentimes then we're like, you know, easy, easy money, like easy bait, to be taken advantage of, to be used, to be overworked and underpaid because of that. And when you do start to set those boundaries, as you did with the do not disturb, then it's met with resistance. And then that's when you know, wow, like these values are no longer aligned. And I'm so grateful that you're here to be a testament that I I did everything that I could to make it work. Like I think you were mentioned that you were like very senior at the organization too, doing all these different things, but you found that because the values weren't aligned, they weren't respecting you, they weren't honoring you, they weren't honoring those boundaries, that you had to find some place that would. And then, of course, that's how you met Kayla. And so I just hope that folks that are tuning in or re listening to this episode that may find themselves resonating with this understand that not every situation is meant to be for you. And I know sometimes you want to do our best, you want to make it work, but sometimes your best is somewhere else. And so I feel like that's something that you've been able to demonstrate, and you did it like a very nice transition too. It wasn't very abrupt. Like you were very intentional about the change and how that worked out for you. And I would love for Kayla to jump into this too on what that process looked like.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel stuck, right? They feel stuck. They don't feel like there's an answer. I think that is in a lot of areas of life, whether it's a relationship, it's your career. You've put so much into something. It's like the
Yeah,
sunken cost fallacy, right? Where it's like, but
right,
I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing this for 20 years. How can I just jump ship, right?
right.
And that's not the method. The method is to be methodical. The method is to um, have a plan. And yes, there is a point that comes, and we had many conversations before Veltria decided to jump, where it's like, is the time now? And if it's not, that's okay, right? But that's still the goal, and the time might be right in a month. It might be right in 3 months. And I understand that perhaps this was a unique situation and that not every employer can wait, or every employer can, you know, be as patient or as accommodating. But for me, it was about, again, I saw Veltria. I saw her value before she saw her value as a human, as an HR professional, even though she wasn't in that capacity. I saw all of those things in her. And so for me, it was just every next conversation, I could see a little bit more light coming back to her and a little bit more light coming back to her, and knowing she was getting there and that in her time she would tell me she was ready. Um, and that's really what the process looked like, to be honest. This
You were her
conversation.
mentor, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The conversation today is about not shrinking yourself. And I remember when Veltria was getting ready to do her first training for us in front of all the lawyers, we had a conversation about, like, I wanted her to show up as her. Like, this was a new client. I was trusting her to go in with a new client and do her thing. And I had no trepidation whatsoever. I knew she was going to kill it. And she did. But I remember the day before kind of talking about, like, I just want you to bring your authentic self. And if they don't like your authentic self, then they're not for us as a client. And that's okay. Like, I would rather have the right clients than a lot of clients. So that's, I think, part of how I create the safe space. My team knows that. Like, they know we have our values as an organization. I live them, they live them, and it's how we stay true to ourselves and don't shrink. So yeah.
I think that also, in the process, for me, and I shared this with Kayla, was that in the end, when I decided that I had to leave my job, my previous position, I needed to leave because I needed to leave, not because I wanted to come to HHR.
Hmm.
I needed to leave that situation clean for me.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, I looked at it like a relationship. And if you have been in a long term bad relationship, the last thing you need to do is jump into a new relationship because it
Mhm.
feels good for that moment.
Right.
And,
Good.
I was prepared to I was like, I haven't done gig work in a long time, but if I got to do gig work and do this other thing on the side while I figure it out, these are the things I'm willing to do because I'm realizing that this is the way that I come back to me. When I'm talking to my therapist about my experience, and I beat myself up a lot of the time, and I'm like, how did I let myself get to that place? And she reminds me that when you're in the midst of it, you can't always see everything. you know I was taking care of my family. Yes, I have a very wonderful supportive partner. My husband is great. I have a beautiful daughter, but my trauma response is have a job and pay your bills.
Yeah.
That's my trauma response to life. And so those things come into play. And then this was something I was passionate about. But where it used to be, I love all of the parts of the job, it became I look forward to this one event or this one thing, or I'm scraping for things to hold on to. And along the way, Kayla wasn't the only person to say to me, like, before and after, I'm seeing you come back to life.
I love that.
Um, but the final straw was being there at work on a it may have been a weekend. It could have been just a day off from school. My daughter was with me. Something happened, and I went into my office to close the door and cry. And she was there, and she started packing my bag. And she said, "We need to leave, Mama. You're not happy here today." And that's when I realized, like, this is the example I'm setting.
I got chills, I have to say.
And when your 7-year old is more protective over your well-being and
Hmm.
your mental health than you are being of yourself, like, you got to check yourself. And that's when I was like, I got to change something. And I started with me because I didn't want to blame anyone else. I wanted to get better, and I thought if I got better, my situation would get better. And as I got better and the situation didn't get better, was when I realized that I wasn't in a safe space.
Yeah. Yes. And, one thing that I want to highlight that just really spoke to me was the fact that you left your position because you needed to leave. And I feel like this is a piece that so many people can learn from because we get so comfortable in abuse. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast. And I don't know if it really hits home yet for people, so I will continue to speak to it. But we've gotten so comfortable in trauma that we feel safer in trauma than we feel in a safe space. And particularly as melanated people, as people of color, this is our situation, our modus operandi. And what we learn as we do healing work, as we do self development, is that the trauma is no longer safe. Being silenced, being shut down, being emotionally unavailable is not safe. And when we learn how to speak for ourselves, how I mentioned before, be in our authenticity, be in our truth, and it's met with resistance, that's when we know that we must go to a space where it is met and received with love. That actually is a safe space. And so often we are resistant to that openness because it is so foreign, it is so unknown, it's frankly scary. And in this journey, so much of this journey is about exploring that unknown, jumping into those spaces where we may not be comfortable, but actually are better for us. And it's just beautiful that you have a mentor such as Kayla who was able to see that in you and speak that life into you because a lot of people don't have that. And for you to be able to have that as you're making that transition is a godsend. Frankly, is a godsend. And thank you to Kayla too for being able to recognize and acknowledge because too often people see others' weaknesses and prey on it, like how I was spoken to before, how our other you know superiors or other colleagues were preying on it as opposed to nurturing it and seeing the value in it. And so, yeah, kudos to everybody here for this situation because it is certainly one that a lot of people are in, particularly in corporate America, in businesses where they're not in the ownership role, where they're subject to, the nuances of people's and whims of people's personalities or character and are not able to be in their fullest expression.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen this not just in Veltria's experience, in others though, where when they do come over to our company and they are experiencing that safe space that's so foreign to them, there is truly this period of adjustment that I can see. Just last week, I messaged Veltria late because I'm always working. I'm a business owner. I'm supposed to be. She's not, right? And so she responds, and I take the time to stop and say, "You do know you don't need to respond to me after 5 o'clock, right?" Like, I know you know this, but I just want to reiterate that, like, because I know she feels obligated because of her past experience. And I have to, like, reinforce that. Like, this is not that kind of place. Like, you're here to, like, not be a worker bee. You're not here to just punch a clock. You are here because you are amazing and you bring such awesome things to our clients, you know? So I don't know. I notice that a lot, and I think it's really hard. And so, like, for people to make that jump to a safe place, to your point.
Mhm.
It's funny because one of the things that my therapist said to me last week at the end, I was telling her actually about that email exchange, and I was like, I know, I'm healing, Kayla. um, and she just reminded me, she said, isn't it beautiful how God has had your back throughout this progress, throughout from beginning to end while you were going through it? He held you up, then he led you through all of this, and then, he helped you develop a new relationship with Kayla. And like, and she's so right. And I grew up very religious, and I don't know that I'm religious anymore, but I am still very spiritual.
Mhm.
And realizing a few things throughout this process, and I know this is something that you talk about in your podcast, Aaron, a lot, is the times throughout my life where, and especially through the last like 5 years, I would say, where I found it difficult to trust God through the process because I was no longer had trust in myself,
That part.
and because I had gotten so lost in the work and in the cycle of what needs to be done and how often it needs to be done, and just getting it done, and even trauma bonding with my coworkers.
Mm.
um it's very easy when you're all going through the same thing, and it's a lot of pressure and pandemic and the impact on our industry and all the things that happened, to stay there. But I stopped trusting myself through that process, which made it very hard for me to know and be able to turn around and look to God the way that I knew how previously. I
Mm.
had to reestablish my relationship. And
Mm.
it's funny because it was one of my good friends that I met through my former job, but he left a while ago, and he and I are still very close. He I was really upset one day, and I texted him, and he just texted back, "When's the last time you went to church?"
Mm.
Because he knew how important that used to be to me. And I had it. And I was like, "Well, I haven't in such a long time, and now I feel like weird." And I started with just going to a worship night, and then opening myself up to just the idea again. But I didn't trust myself for so long that I've forgotten how to trust God and let him lead me.
I am so glad you said that because it's a truth and it's an honest truth, and so many people need to be honest with themselves about where they at. And when we are able to acknowledge, like, hey, because I've like literally the journey is so similar for me too. Like I went through a point in my life where I was just so disconnected that I didn't trust myself. I was so insecure because I had no security and didn't have a strong relationship with God. They are so interconnected. They are so inextricably linked that this is why the podcast is so important in talking about cultivating those conversations with God, just like you would with, like I said, your man, with your woman, with your best friend. That is, you should be tighter with God than all of those people combined. And I feel like this is where a lot of people have just, and there's no judgment. Like I always say, we listen, we don't judge, we look, we don't judge. But at the end of the day, we've just gotten so caught up in, like you said, paying the bills, going to work, pleasing everybody else, making sure the kids good, making sure my man good, making sure my mama good, making sure, like, this is me like minutes before the podcast. So it's just like I'm making sure everything else is good, but like, wait, have I talked to God yet? Have I connected to God yet? What am I feeling? What am I sensing? What am I going through? That gets lost and left behind very quickly. So it is necessary and incumbent upon us to do that self work, that connection work back to ourselves, how we're feeling, and of course, what God wants for us. And I'm. This is like, I love talking about having these conversations because obviously, like, I'm just like, God is everything to me, and I too am not really, church going or church, even supporting. To be honest, like, I'm putting it all out there. I really feel like we all should be individually connecting back to God and not really relying on someone to take us there. We should be, praying over ourselves and not for other people all the time, especially when we got a lot of shit going on in our own lives. And so, this is really, really important. And it's just, you, like I said, you're just such a testimony. Like, when a moment I met you, Veltria, of your journey, what you've been through, how Kayla's walked with you as, a woman, as another Black woman, a beautiful, loving, and knowledgeable woman who is not, obviously melanated. But at the end of the day, this is just like a picture perfect example of what it looks like when people are aligned righteously and with God, and how it can create something so beautiful for your life. And yeah, so I just had to, give all of you guys your flowers because this is just such a beautiful situation.
And I just want to add something. I read in a devotional in like 2019. I was going through another change in my life. My kid would just turn 2. It's, those are interesting times in our lives. And I read in a devotional that in order to find your purpose, you need to figure out where your burdens meet your passions.
Okay.
And I hadn't found that until recently, because my burden was that I was not in a workplace where I felt like I was being taken care of, and that I could help then take care of others because of that. And that is, and my passion is leadership. My
Mm,
passion is mentoring. My passion is creating the culture of an organization where people grow.
yeah.
And through my relationship with Kayla, through learning, through studying for this certification that maybe one day I'll actually take the test for, I realized that where my burden met my passion, my purpose, at least for now in my life, is HR.
Nice.
Yeah, and Aaron, the reason Alicia connected us was because of DEI, right?
Yeah.
So that's it's the same. I mean, it's the same but different for a lot of reasons. That is also where my burden and passion connect, and there's so much work to be done in organizations. DE and I as buzzwords are frustrating, to say the least.
Definitely.
In practice, when they're actually met with the human component
Yes.
of knowing who individuals are and how their experiences influence how they show up at work is is a different journey that Veltria and I are on
Yeah.
than just saying we do DEI, right? Like that's completely different. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
When Veltria did her first training, it was on identifying social identities and how that comes to work. Like no matter what that is. Like are you do you love God? Are you Muslim? Do you like have 5 kids? Are you an immigrant? Are you from the Midwest like me? Like how do all of those things influence how you show up. And how does that lead to situations in the workplace that could be harmful depending on how people are perceiving you in ways that might not even be true? And that's really where we're able to dive deeper with organizations and help them understand, it's not just buzzwords. There's a purpose for having programs, not just say, oh yeah, we do that, we're an equal opportunity employer, but what does that mean? Right, like what does that look
Right.
like? So yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about the human journey, because this is what I'm like, sort of like my manifesto and my call to action for organizations or people working in leadership positions in organizations is, what about the people? What about the human journey? Is the focus of your business strategy. And the fact that this is something that, I mean, it's like in the name of your business actually. And to be able to bring that to bear, to inspire that change, is essentially where the new business frontier needs to go or has to go. It's like the it's like the dichotomy that where we're at right now. Like you have billboards in San Francisco that are like, humans are so 2024, and here I am like, humans are like necessary for the future. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't do the tech stuff without humans, and we can't forget about, in that journey, the soul, the connection back to God, all of this that created all of this. And so that's why I've never been one to have fear around technology or fear around changes happening in business, because as long as we're on an evolutionary journey, as long as, to Veltria's point, we're doing the healing work, we're doing the self-development work, we're building that relationship with God, how can we will always outpace technology? And so when you're focusing on that human journey, then you're always going to win, in my view.
Yeah, for sure. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's starting to kind of wrap up, our conversation today. And before we close it out, I want to give you guys a space to again kind of share a bit more about your company, how people can find you, work with you, learn more about the human journey in business and organizations.
Yeah, for sure. So we're on Instagram at Humanity HR, Facebook, LinkedIn, Veltria also has their own social media. Our website's humanityhr.com, so pretty easy to remember. But what we do, we have sort of a three-phased approach. Most of our clients come to us because maybe they've got some compliance issues. They got a letter from an attorney saying like you didn't do something right. And so we liken our process to a garden that it's been overrun with weeds. It's a mess. You're not doing things maybe the way you need to by the law and you're getting in trouble. So we first like help prune that, help do the compliance piece. Once that's cleaned up, then we can start to plant these seeds that are more important about how do you align your people operations with your business operations to make sure that's in alignment. Planting those seeds with the owners about, have you done some mindfulness work? How do you feel about these things? Are we developing ourselves as individuals and leaders? And then it is the third phase is really helping them create positive workplaces where they are the employer of choice. It's not just this is all I could get, but no, I want to go work for that company because they treat people well and they are taking care of their people and they understand how to make a safe work environment. And so we do all of those things. It's really a full cycle. It's yes, we'll do a project here and there, but we work best by the relationship building with organizations and seeing them go from 5 employees to 25 employees to 150 employees and continuing to develop and really truly see their people and help their people thrive. That's what we're here to do. Want to add anything, Veltria, to that?
Yeah, did you want to add anything?
I don't. I mean, I'm still new to the company, but the work that I have been able to do through training and connection, and I mean, from from systems implementation to now I'm doing a one-on-one training with a manager to teach about the importance of HR from a manager perspective. I have been able to see the impact that it makes um, on such a small level. And I love what we're doing. I think that if you have a business and you have questions and you think you can use us, I think even if I didn't work for humanity, I would recommend Humanity more. So, I think that the work that is being done, and so often it's easy to write off HR work. It's the paperwork, it's the getting people in trouble, but it's so much more than that if you do it right.
Right. I love that. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining the show and also for sharing and being vulnerable about your own journeys, your personal journeys, because that actually is really what inspires others that are listening. And for all of you who are new to my show or want to engage a little bit more with my work, you can find me at erinpatton.com, also across social media at I am Erin Patton. And this show, The Meta Business Millennial, airs every week. So certainly check us out where you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those things. And, of course, if this resonates with you, I want to hear from you. DM me, comment on this video, and certainly like it if it really, really floats your boat. So, again, we love you all so much, and we're so grateful for you joining us. Much love and light. Peace.
Thank you.
Did you really love this episode of the Meta Business Millennial podcast? Well, I am honored, and I appreciate you subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends, because your feedback allows us to co-create more enlightened conversations. And if you're interested in growing your soul now, head over to my website, erinpatton.com, to find all the show notes, links, and free resources to get your energy activated today. In the meantime, stay bright, my friends. Much love and light. Peace.